Hey everybody, sorry for the little delay here, trying to get the new computer up and working. I'm here, and Boyd's here to do our next little notes, looking at Dwight D. Eisenhower and his policies in the 50s and what kind of things he puts together for the U.S. as we go through the 50s and the Cold War. So, this guy here, Dwight D. Eisenhower, the 34th President of the United States, and I understand he was a former general during World War II. Obviously, he was the guy who was in control in Europe. He was the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. He was actually what's called the only ever five-star general. He had 5 stars on his collar, basically highest ranking general ever in U.S. history. He was elected in the Korean War, which was at this point not popular. In fact, he said he would end the war because of how unpopular it was with the people. One of the things he said was he said, "I will go to Korea." People were, as we're looking at our web quests, the Korean War was some people, let's say, very popular at the time in the 50s when he's up for election. And so he says, "I'll go to Korea. I'll see what's going on. We're going to fix the problems." And so he says that, and he did. He was one of the first presidents to ever use TV. So he had ads that said things like, "I like Ike." That was his nickname. Dwight D. Eisenhower's nickname was Ike. He was very strong in the Cold War, but really, he honestly hated war. He had seen war, didn't like it, didn't want it to happen. He was a soldier through and through, and he kind of knew what would happen if we went to World War III. He was really afraid what might go down. At the same time, he also had this father-like figure to him, kind of like a grandfather-like, very, very experienced golfer. In fact, he puts a putting green on the White House lawn because he loved golfing like none other. So he also wanted to change a lot of things in the U.S., including invent the U.S. highway system. So he was one of the guys that started that up. Now, his Secretary of State was a man named John Foster Dulles, and he creates the idea of brinkmanship. Brinkmanship basically means we're going to go to the very brink of war. So we will push, 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 push to the very edge of nuclear war to get what we want. Okay, it really adds to the fear because we started bringing in new bombers, the B-52, which are still used today, some of the biggest bomber planes in history. Okay, 8 big jet engines on them, and he kind of says we're going to put most of our money and our military in our big bombers, our nuclear missiles, our nuclear bombs, less army, less navy, especially after the Korean War, and more focus on, the big stuff, big bombers, those kind of things. It really kind of adds to the fear of the time about, will a nuclear war happen? Will a nuclear war go down? And obviously, these things came up in the Middle East. In our last notes, we kind of talked about foreign policy and foreign aid and all those kind of ideas. And it was under Eisenhower's control where the CIA, helped overthrow the rule of Iran to get oil. Make sure they didn't sell oil to the Soviet Union. It was under his command where the CIA got in trying to help control the Suez Canal in Egypt, where the U.S. promised to buy Egypt a power dam. They use all his spy tactics. So he was really involved there, and he creates what he calls the Eisenhower Doctrine. We basically said that we will defend any Middle Eastern country from a Soviet Union attack. So if Soviet Union came in any Middle Eastern country, whether it be Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Iran or Israel, whoever, if they were going to attack, we would respond with a full nuclear strike. He was ready to, drop nukes if needed. And this whole thing was actually approved by Congress saying, hey, if this happened overseas somewhere, we are going to step in. Now, in 1953, Joseph Stalin dies. He has a massive aneurysm in his brain. He dies, passes away. He's put in state. And the question is, who's going to be in charge now? And the new Soviet premier, the new head of the Soviet Party in Soviet Union, is this man in the picture named Nikita Khrushchev. And Nikita Khrushchev is a little bit different in Stalin. Stalin was that guy, remember, who was totally totalitarian, was ready to, take you out at a moment's notice. Khrushchev tried to make a nicer, kinder Soviet Union. It's something as in your notes. He did something called de-Stalinization, trying to take away all those bad things that Stalin did and try to make them go away. He wanted to see the Soviet Union really expand in terms of science, technology. Instead of bettering people, bettering the United States on the battlefield, let's better them in science and school and those kind of things. He did a lot of things like release prisoners from the gulags, stop the executions, that kind of stuff he did. He had a penchant when he was doing his speaking. He would actually take off his shoe and he would bang his shoe against the podium as a way to kind of, make his point, which is a big thing in Russia, actually, the idea of shoes and that kind of stuff. And so he would, and I joke with people about Khrushcheving. That's where you take your shoe and you bang it against the podium where you're talking. Now, some Eastern European countries heard about this new, nicer, kinder Soviet Union, and they're like, hey, maybe we can get some freedom this way. Maybe we can get free elections. And one of the first countries to try this is the country of Hungary. And so in 1956, Hungarian leaders are like, hey, let's revolt. Let's try to get away from the Soviet Union. Now they're in the Soviet controlled section, and when the Hungarian people say, hey, we're going to break away, all of a sudden Soviet tanks and Soviet soldiers roll in and kill something like 30,000 people. They take no prisoners. Anybody who was caught revolting against the Communist Party is taken out. In fact, about 200,000 is extra zero in there, okay? 200,000 people just start running for the hills. They flee to France and Italy and other countries trying to get out of Hungary because they're afraid of the Soviet Union. Really, no, U.S. really couldn't help at all because Hungary is so far into the communist control area that if they try to help, it might touch off World War III. So really not much the United States could do at that point as Hungary tried to revolt and were put down by the Soviet Union. Now let's come to the idea of the space race. Now what you see in the picture there, that is called Sputnik. That was the first ever satellite launched into space. It was launched by the Soviet Union. It was about the size of a big grapefruit, and it had a beeping noise to it. They could track it on radio. The United States was shocked that, oh my God, the Soviet Union had launched a satellite into space, and people were freaking out about this thing. I mean, people really thought that there would be little Sputniks dropping from the sky, like attacking their buildings and that kind of stuff. People actually stood outside to watch Sputnik zip by. Today, if you stand outside at night, you can see satellites and those kind of things go by. This was a huge deal in the 50s when all of a sudden this happened. The U.S. was shocked. I mean, they're like, oh my God, we cannot be beaten by the Soviet Union. And so they started throwing tons and tons of money into the space program. And that now is today called NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration. And so now they start making satellites and those kind of things because they're really worried about missiles. Whatever is propelling these satellites up in the air could also propel a missile and a bomb to the United States. Now, shortly after Sputnik, we launched our first satellite, Explorer 1. And later on, we're going to be kind of following the Soviets because they'll put the first animal into space, a dog named Laika. Then they're going to put the first man into space, Yuri Gagarin. And until we go to the moon, pretty much in 1969, they beat us in everything that involves anything space related. So now, one thing we do have is the idea of missile technology here. Now, one thing that after World War II happened, both Soviet Union and the United States tried to take all the German technology we could. All the scientists, all those kind of things, especially a guy named Werner von Braun, who is kind of like the German missile expert. Now, Germany had made the V-2 rocket, a missile they launched in Germany to go and bomb the crap out of London. And so they launched these missiles from Germany and could go bomb London. And so both the U.S. and Soviet Union, I just dropped the dog, and Soviet Union tried to, boy, he just slipped here in my lap, both technology tried to create missiles to develop nuclear weapons, and also use the same thing to launch ships and satellites, those kind of things. What they create are these guys up here called an intercontinental ballistic missile, where this missile actually launches up into space, and then it releases the warhead, the bomb, if you will, and the bomb will fall back down to Earth onto the appointed city. And people start freaking out because, you could see airplanes coming, you could see jet bombers, those kind of things coming, and try to shoot them down. This thing you couldn't shoot down, so people are really freaking out like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Especially as we talked last time, new bombs like the hydrogen bomb, developed by Edward Teller, who was an American guy. It was 1,000 times more powerful than the A bomb. Eventually, the Soviets test their own bomb, Tsar Bomba, 50 megaton bomb, which I think I showed you guys once already in class what that would do. And we'll take a look at it again on Wednesday to see just what that kind of bomb would do to a place like here. So we start putting something together called a civil defense group. And basically, this was just kind of the idea to prepare for a nuclear attack. So every single city had a bomb siren. Every single city had a fallout shelter. Try and prepare for when a nuclear bomb hit. Not if it would come, but when it would come. And one of the things people do in school is something called duck and cover drills, where kids would have to go and hide underneath their desks and put their hands over their neck and basically put their head between their legs and kiss their butt goodbye and to protect them from a nuclear bomb. Now, obviously, this would not protect you from a nuclear bomb by any means, but it made people feel better, made people feel safe that if this did happen, that, they would be protected, would be safe, and they had to do these drills in school all the time to get ready in case when the nuclear bomb came. People also built their own bomb shelters in their house. So underneath the houses or out in the yards or wherever, they dig these bomb shelters where you could live for months if a bomb did hit. So being underground is going to protect you from the fire and all kind of stuff. They also had like ventilation systems and air purifiers to keep out nuclear radiation. They would stock up canned food, cans of beans and boxes of dried potatoes and that kind of stuff, and all kinds of water. And they had power generators. I mean, these things are still around today. I remember I had a middle school teacher who had a giant bomb shelter in his backyard. Yet he was kind of crazy, dude. Kind of awesome though. And he had like a huge like a 4 or 5 bedroom bomb shelter in his backyard actually that was built in the 50s and he kind of kept around. So I mean, he kind of see the inside of a family's bomb shelter here. Now in the 1959, Cuba has a revolution. Now obviously things with Cuba today are getting a little better as we go, but Cuba had been ruled by a dictator, a guy named Miguel Batista, and so the dictator was U.S. support. U.S. helped him, put him in power there, and so that guy tended to help the rich, not the poor. And so this guy, this guy Fidel Castro, who you see in the picture here, kind of want to step in and say, hey, there's going to be a revolution for the Cuban people. And so he got an army together and took control of U.S.-owned properties, U.S.-owned businesses, all those kind of things in Cuba, got rid of the dictator Batista, and he got lots of help from the Soviet Union. Not like soldier help, that we know of at least, but more like, guns and money and bombs and that kind of stuff he got help from the Soviet Union with. So when this happens, obviously you have the Soviet Union back country, something like 40 miles from Florida, the U.S. starts freaking out a little bit, and so they break off all their contact, all the economic things with Cuba, and actually Eisenhower starts ordering the CIA to equip Cuban exiles, people who fled away from Castro for fear of, death and that kind of stuff, who came to Florida to overthrow Cuba. We'll talk more about this in the 60s with John F. Kennedy. Kennedy has what we call the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it kind of leads into that in the 60s as well. Now, a couple of things that Ike does here at home. Anything to hear the term domestic policy is what the president does or the government does to improve life here in the U.S. And one of the things Eisenhower drew upon was his knowledge from the Army and his experience in World War II. Okay? And one of the biggest things he improves is a U.S. transportation network. Now, obviously, you guys are looking forward to getting your driver's license. We have highways because of Dwight D. Eisenhower, okay? He knew that, one of his arguments was that, big cities were a target for attack. And if they knew a bomb was coming to, like, New York or Chicago, one of those big cities, they're thinking, hey, how the heck are we getting all the people out of here? The little roads at the time were, two-lane roads, dirt roads even for that matter, and they're like, how can we do that? Well, Eisenhower learned from the Autobahn highway in Germany. Autobahn is one of the biggest highways in the world. There's no speed limit on it. In fact, you can get a ticket for going too slow on the Autobahn. Just ask Mr. West. I heard he got one once. Germany had these huge Autobahn, this big highway connecting all the cities. And Eisenhower kind of said, hey, you know what? Germany could move their military back and forth really, really easily because of the big highways. When the U.S. was trying to move military goods during World War II, it took forever to get them from factories in like Chicago and Wisconsin to the coast to ship to Europe. And so he figured, hey, if we start building these highways, not only can we transport military goods, but in case we have to evacuate one of these cities, in case World War III happens, in case a nuclear attack happens, we can get people the heck out of Dodge and make sure that they're nice and safe. And so also these do later on is that the highways connect suburbs to cities. Talk about Levittown before break, right? These little suburbs out there. The highways connected these little outer suburbs, might be 10, 20 miles out, to the cities. I mean, think about, and not really here, but think about, I-90, okay, that comes up to the Dells, and goes through like DeForest and then Sun Prairie, those kind of areas. It helps to connect those places together. And so now you start seeing a lot of people leave the cities, suburbs get really, really big, and you start seeing where people live outside the city and work in the city. Instead of going on a little two-lane highway, kind of like I'm sure Highway 12 used to be back in the 50s, now it's 4 lanes, easy to travel, all those kind of things happen to it. Eisenhower also civil rights. He proposes a lot of laws to Congress, but he doesn't have a lot of power to make the laws, so not much happens with civil rights for him. He does try to protect, we'll talk about this when we get into the civil rights unit next week. He does do things like try to protect integrated schools and those kind of things and help some of the protests towards ending civil rights and segregation. Paris Conference is a big thing too here. The 4 big powers meet to discuss the Cold War. They have lots of changes, trying to make peace talks. Basically, if you want to try and do less nuclear weapons, check our next piece, guys. I'll be right back.